Welcome to Money Tales, where money gets personal. I'm Cammie Doder.
And I'm Sandy Brager.
What if the most powerful money tool is not a spreadsheet, but a pause? In this episode, Viswanathan and Johann Berlin, co-founders of TruWorth, explore how our earliest experiences and cultural expectations shape the way we save, spend, give, and talk about money, often without us realizing it. From immigrant family sacrifice to the lasting imprint of losing a home in the savings and loans crisis, they show how money stories can create both strength and shadow.
Here are 3 money conversations this episode will help you navigate. First, when does a healthy money habit become a hidden limitation? Values like saving and discipline can be powerful foundations, and they can also create pressure or fear if you don't examine them. Second, what is the power of taking a short, intentional pause before making a money decision? A moment of reflection can shift you away from reacting out of habit and toward making choices that are aligned with what matters most now. And third, what changes when you stop trying to win a money conversation and start practicing real listening? Listening deeply, even when perspectives differ, creates the space for people to feel seen, heard, and understood. Now it's our pleasure to bring you Uma and Johann's Money Tales.
Welcome, Johann Berlin and Uma Viswanathan. It is a pleasure to have you both on the Money Tales podcast today.
Great. We are so happy to be here too.
Wonderful to be with you guys.
Before we kick things off, I wanted to share an appreciation for these tools out there to help raise money. Specifically, GoFundMe was something that I recently contributed to for a life event. And it got me thinking about before what you used to do and when you wanted to be able to help someone out financially. Sandy, I wanted to raise it here with you and get your thoughts. The power of it is incredible. And then I'm also curious other ways that we can give and support people when they're in a situation where you want to or they need it.
Yes. Well, GoFundMe has become a very common tool to raise money for community needs, for individual needs, which is really amazing. I know several folks in my community who have come together and raised money that individuals and families have needed to get through a crisis of one sort or another, which is a really cool use of the tool. I seem to think there's something you might have to do when you set up GoFundMe, and I've never set one up myself, but I think you might have to organize it a little bit specifically to make sure that the money raised isn't taxable to the recipient, because that would be a bad result in times of crisis.
Oh, so important.
But I don't know exactly what that is. So if someone out there needs to act on that, do a little bit of research. But otherwise, there are tax laws that indicate that we can give up to $19,000 per person in 2026. That amount does inflate every year to any other individual, whether we're related to them or not, without any gift tax consequences. And so that means married folks have the opportunity to give $19,000 times 2, because each of them has a $19,000 exclusion, to an individual recipient. And if a couple is giving money to a couple, then you take that $19,000 and you multiply it by 4. It's a really nice, easy way to be able to give meaningful amounts of money to someone else. We utilize this a lot with clients when they're making gifts from one generation to another. There are rules that go beyond the $19,000. Everyone in the United States has a lifetime exemption, so they could give millions of dollars away without triggering a gift tax. And what a lot of people don't know about, and we have talked about it before on Money Tales, is that if you make payments for healthcare and or education costs on behalf of someone else, and you make those payments directly to the provider of those services, then there is an unlimited amount of gifts that you can give. And that can be extremely helpful when someone's facing a medical calamity or when you're trying to help fund someone's education.
That one is so important. I mean, they're all important. It's really powerful to know that you can do so up to a certain point with some of the situations where they're not going to be taxed. They get the money, you get to help. And it feels really good to jump in and do so.
That's right. And I want to mention, because this just astounds me, my daughter, who is currently a junior in high school, just applied for a scholarship that an individual sponsors. It's a merit-based scholarship. And this individual pays full cost, full freight for education for 15 students per year.
Oh, wow.
To go to the college of their choice, whatever college they get into, which I think is pretty amazing. So there are really cool ways to use gift exclusions, and perhaps in this individual situation, there's some charitable giving tools and in techniques that they're using too. But there's a lot of opportunity out there. So don't let tax rules get in the way of your generosity. Just be very clear on what you're trying to achieve and do a little bit of research, get a little bit of counsel when necessary, and put together a great plan for you and perhaps others in the community to help fund an important cause.
So good, Sandy. Well, it's our pleasure to turn our conversation over to you, Uma and Johann. What's one thing we should know about each of you? And what's one thing we should know about you as a couple?
One thing to know about me is that throughout my life, the thing that gets me going is I love humans. I just love people and like quirky characters, pokey people, like whatever you're like, there is usually something in you that I can completely fall in love with, but also see the strength in. And like deeply, deeply curious and fascinated by who each of us are, what makes us tick, what makes us feel and think the things that we do. And that has actually been the driving force for me, even in making career choices and being able to navigate really challenging situations, is that I can usually find something to love in almost everyone.
That's a beautiful trait. Oh my goodness.
I think for me, something I'd want people to know is that I believe people can come out of the most challenging situations and have so much resilience and capacity beyond what they know. And I know that from my own life experiences, just overcoming disabilities. I had a physical disability whenever I was really young. They had to break my leg to make my leg straight. And I've completely overcome that. I did sports, other things, but also cognitive. I had a meningitis when I was a baby. So throughout my life, people thought, oh, this is going to lead to major learning challenges. And for a while, that became a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I just know there are so many people who are struggling. So I just wanted to share that about myself, and that others have that optimism and can lean into support and ask for help when they need it, because the human spirit is so resilient. And that is just something that I hold that's fundamental to me.
What another impactful message. And don't label me, darn it. I can do anything I set my mind to do. All right, tell us, what's one thing we should know about you two as a couple?
One is definitely we share a lot of our like purpose orientation, our love and curiosity about people and the world, and this like sense of like we can create things in the world around us, but we're also really different. And there's something really powerful about that too. Even if you just look at our horoscopes, Johann's like a triple Taurus and I'm a Pisces. You think about that like bull, the tenacity, the like strength, the groundedness of that. And I'm like a fish and I can just flow. And there is actually something really powerful about that for us as a couple, but also as partners in a business, to be able to flow together in that way.
And Uma, I think that's a really good transition to you guys telling us more about the work that you do together and how you came together to do that work.
We're very much service-driven people. We've been involved in business and philanthropy and social change work. But ultimately, we get really motivated and inspired whenever we see something that people are struggling with and want to think about what is something that we could do to help with that. And one of the things we were observing was just how despondent and even to some degree nihilistic young people are becoming whenever they think about their financial futures and pathways of opportunity in this country. And some of the outcomes that leads to, of just, needing to social signal that your life's perfect on social media, or maybe it's like throwing all your money into meme stocks, which have no underlying value, and you may make money in the volatility, but you very likely are going to lose a lot of money and get addicted to the gambling aspect of whenever we get these big wins and these big losses and the swings and instability that creates. But then also just worrying about what is the future for us with AI and all these other things. And fundamentally, I think we're both optimists, but we're also realists. And we wanted to get at, you can't change all the systems around you. but you can look at your own beliefs around money. Some of them may benefit you, some of them may really limit you. Some of the inherited social contracts that we've sort of opted into, that maybe we don't consciously know that we carry, that show up in the way we relate to money, in the way we relate to our spouses, or in the way that we relate to our businesses and our work. And then lastly, I think one of the things that we really wanted to get at is we believe when you take action and have reflection, so action reflection loops, that you can relieve some of this anxiety that people feel of just feeling like that money or wealth are these big, overwhelming topics that I have to either solve all at once and get really rah-rah about, or I feel really down and like I'm going nowhere. I've been trying at this for so long. I'm actually making more money, the money I thought would give me freedom money, and it doesn't feel like it. So we wanted to come up with something that was grounded in behavioral science, grounded in action learning models where you can do small things, build awareness, and then integrate it into your life over time. And so that's really what inspired us to write the book and start TruWorth.
I can maybe share a little bit more about it. We wrote a book called Wealth and Why We Seek It. We wanted to really distill between the behavioral science, between our shared understanding across actually multiple different sectors, what is actually driving us individually, collectively to be seeking wealth. And so we distilled it down and we discovered that there are sort of four main motivators for people around why they're seeking wealth. And we use an expansive definition of wealth to include, it's not just about money, it's also the ways that we express our energy, our talents, the relationships that we hold. You can actually think pretty expansively about what we consider to be a wealthy life, and that sometimes we are seeking security. We want stability. Maybe that's because we grew up with a deal of instability. And so we think that wealth is going to make everything stable again. For some people, it's about status. We want to signal, we want to look a certain way. And we're particularly primed and wired for the things that allow us to look successful. There can be a shadow side to that, of course, where we start to inflate our lifestyles beyond what we can really afford because we want to look a certain way. The third is freedom. A lot of times this is where you find entrepreneurs, people who just want to, do it on their own, beautiful, but also don't often seek the help that they need in order to be able to stabilize. And the fourth is around meaning and purpose. People who are seeking wealth in order to be able to express some deeper purpose. We kind of unpack this even further within our book is the importance of being able to understand, why am I doing this thing before we figure out what we're doing, and then starting to disentangle what's the best way for me to be able to express this purpose. Because again, there's a healthy way and an unhealthy way to be able to do it. And so TruWorth, as a company, we bring people through journeys. So these are actually journeys that people can take on their own. And that's like one of the things that we felt was really important, is that not everybody can afford money coaching, can afford a sort of one-on-one interaction. How do we make this available to lots and lots of people as part of their busy lives? And so we created a set of experiences. One is called the Daily Shift, a 1 week, literally like 10 minutes a day, practicing these little pauses, these self-observations, a lot of what Johann was describing in terms of our methodology, to start to change tiny little habits that over time can really build. And then we have a deeper immersive experience called the Money Story Rewrite, which is a 30-day experience to really understand your money story. And then from there, start to figure out, how is my money story currently being expressed and what do I want my money story to become? We've been piloting, kind of working with different people on their journeys, and have already been learning so much through these experiences.
Can we learn a little bit about your journey and maybe how it fits into these four categories: stability, status, freedom, and then meaning and purpose? What were your beliefs around money growing up?
I grew up with really paradoxical sort of circumstances. So one was, my parents were both like studying psychology. We would go to Zendos and go down to Esalen and do, martial arts and things like that when I was a kid. So there wasn't a huge emphasis on status of money, but we lived in a place where that was really important. I grew up in the Monterey Bay, and so that's like Carmel, Pill Beach, Big Sur.
Oh, right in the backyard of Esalen.
Yeah, exactly. So that was sort of always there. There's a lot of intergenerational wealth there, and obviously that weighs on you when you're a kid. Like when you have that and you know when you don't. I think the biggest imprint that was left on me was, and this was part of why my parents ended up splitting, but we ended up losing our house during the savings and loans crisis in the late 80s. We were aspiring into like a middle class, upper middle class kind of life. And then it all just got kind of wiped out. And that had a bunch of implications for my experience growing up and my family. But it definitely limited some of my beliefs around security.
Stability. Yeah.
Yeah. And my reaction to that was to be uber diligent. Like I remember when I bought my first house when I was in college so I could rent out the rooms downstairs so I wouldn't have to pay rent.
Oh, you were one of those kids.
Yeah. But I remember my dad's like, you spent more time on this house than I spent on all the houses I bought combined, just in doing the due diligence beforehand and like cash flow analysis, this thing, that thing. So that's good. That diligence has served me in some ways, but it also has a shadow side. Like sometimes you actually just have to be able to let go. Sometimes you have to be able to know that you can't plan out everything, right? You can't see every scenario. So there's this fine line. Yeah, I think that's one that really stands out to me. But I think the other thing that experience taught me, it was, I remember my dad, how hard it was on my dad. And I remember just like this was something I actually recently shared about in a Men's Health article, just money, shame, and inherited beliefs that get passed down in generations and how that can
That is real.
It's very real.
And particularly for men too. I think that's one of the things too.
Yeah. But I remember this one moment in particular, and I'm sure my dad will be fine with me sharing this, but I remember there was this moment we were in the car and we'd just driven to the bank. I remember he just started crying. And my dad's this big, strong guy, and he just started crying. And, you know, what was so interesting reflecting back on that moment was my dad also found such a deep faith in that we'll be taken care of. It was like such a crushing moment, but it was also such a moment where I saw him model an ability to feel his feelings and to know we're going to be okay. And I can have I have faith that we're going to be okay, a deeper faith in that. And we're both meditators and like that. And that's a gift that my dad gave me was learning how to meditate. But
What powerful modeling.
yeah.
Incredible.
And I want to go back for a second to what Uma was saying before about men kind of carrying the weight of some of these experiences, and say more about that, Uma.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to speak on behalf of men because I'm not one. But I think even, and maybe this also has to do with a little bit of our dynamic too, is that there is a particular, I think, societal sense of responsibility that I think men have of like, ultimately it sort of comes down to me and I've got to make sure that everything's okay. And it's not that women don't share that, but I do think that there is something about that, and especially when you're talking generationally. I don't know how much that's evolved. But I do think even, Johann, even hearing stories about your grandpa and then what, grandpa grew up in the Great Depression and they lost their home. So there's something about that feeling that get potentially passed down from like generation to generation, and the sense of what it means to be a man and provide. And I think that expectation, and then you think about in the level of uncertainty that people are experiencing in our economy right now too, what that does for like a sense of healthy masculinity to feel like, I don't know how to navigate this and I don't know what to do right now and it's on me. Again, I'm not saying it should be gendered like that, but I do think that is a part of what we live in.
I appreciate you saying that, because you're highlighting that our money stories are formed not only by who we are innately as human beings, experiences we've had in life, especially those when we were young, and what's happening in the external world around us, either in terms of actual events unfolding or societal expectations.
Uma, what about you? How did your money beliefs form?
Great segue. When I think about my story, a lot of it is, what does it mean to be the first? I'm a daughter of immigrants. And so my dad moved here when he was in his early 20s with literally $8 in his pocket.
Wow.
And like a big brother who looked out for him here. He grew up in a really tiny village in India. He didn't have shoes till he went to college. I mean, it was literally, he grew up in like a one-room house, sleeping on a mat on the floor. But this sense of deep focus on education, there was a lot of investment that his dad made of like, you're not limited by whatever this is. That dream was there. That sense of possibility was there. And it helps to be like a nerdy brain. And like, you can do that. You can go. So he ended up becoming a researcher at IBM and working there for 40 years.
Wow.
As a nanotechnologist, electron beam lithography. I don't know what those things are, but
Sounds very important.
I want to look it up.
Sounds very important. And he's got all these patents. I mean, I'm super proud of my dad. But that sense of you have like so much self-discipline. And I think that's a lot of what I saw my dad bring, is that you work hard, you have self-discipline, you save, no matter what. And then they invested in my sisters and my education, but my parents didn't really spend much on themselves. Like even as the income grew a bit, I didn't grow up wealthy, but I grew up like middle class, upper middle class. But they stayed in probably a house that was smaller than what they needed to stay in order to be able to save as much as they could for us, and then to be able to send a lot of money back home to India. And, I think my dad now has, both his brothers are here, a sister, and it was sort of like the idea of remittances. This is what a lot of immigrant families do, is part of it is your responsibility is not just your immediate family, it's to take care of the overall wealth of the whole family, the opportunities so like they would pay for, medical and family weddings and, education, what you were talking about initially too. This orientation is that money is not just for you. It's not even just for your own kids. It's meant to be growing everybody's experiences in some way too. And so that was a lot of my modeling around the purpose of money. At the same time, there was a lot of risk aversion that I picked up as well, which is don't rock the boat.
Uma, you and I are so similar.
This is like, these are the messages that I got growing up, which is you probably don't want to be pushing too hard at work. Like maybe don't ask for a promotion. Like they'll see your good work and they'll give it to you, like that kind of thing. And, maybe not taking the right kind of risk in a real estate investment. Let's say that maybe there could have been a big payoff, but like, why rock the boat? Stay in your like stable home right now. At the same time, interestingly for me, this is like probably where the opposite is, because I grew up with that stability. I'm a bit of a rule breaker and a like, come on, like we can just try it. So maybe we aren't so similar. If my parents hadn't sacrificed like that, I don't think that I would be capable of taking a career path that was focused on social impact and purpose, being an entrepreneur, taking a gap of time to figure out, like a couple of times in my career, I've been able to take a leap and not exactly know what was going to be on the other end. I was in a PhD program in psychology that I dropped out of without knowing what was going to come next. And in that leap, I ended up finding my way, actually becoming a meditation teacher, and then eventually doing leadership, social change work, and then found my way into the field of philanthropy, where I'm like investing hundreds of millions of dollars, other people's money, into the work of social change. And so this very unusual, meandering career path that there's no way that my dad in his village in India would have conceptualized that just one generation that would be possible. When I'm stressed, I feel the like, oh God, we got to save. Like, it's almost like that becomes the default setting. But especially when I'm feeling healthy and whole, I have much more of a willingness to take risks than I think my parents ever taught me to as well.
It's interesting that you say that, because as I hear the story of your family and your father in particular, it seems like he took a really big risk when he came here. So you do have that historical foundation.
It's true. And then my parents have an arranged marriage. My parents met twice before they got married. My mom flew across
that's a
the world.
huge risk.
No wonder you're a risk taker. Wow.
You guys had mentioned earlier about some of the tips that you have for people to take a pause and reflect on what's happening for them in terms of their own money story. I was wondering if you could bring one of those ideas to life for our listeners. What's something tangible that folks could do on, it sounds like maybe even on a daily basis?
One of our practices is literally just called the power of the pause. And so in the moment of any sort of, you could say a money transaction, a money choice, it could even be, a little bit more expansive like that. So an example could be you're at a dinner with your friends and then the bill comes and suddenly everybody's splitting the bill, but you're like, wait, I just had a salad and like everybody else got like steak, wine, and all these other things. This doesn't feel fair, right? And there can often be a whole bunch of a swirl of things going on. There can be your automatic reaction to that, which is, I don't want to look bad, so I'm just going to pay it, but I'm going to like secretly resent it. And then the next time we go out, I'm going to like feel all kinds of feelings. The practice could simply be, okay, in this moment, I'm going to pause and I'm going to observe, okay, what's happening inside of me? What are my emotions? What are my thoughts? What's going on? And that might trigger something that happened earlier in your life that causes you to kind of default the way that you do. You might not get that in that moment. You might realize that later, but that what that pause does is it actually gives you the ability to choose. It gives you the ability to say, do I want to pay? Do I want to say something to my friends? Do I want to set a boundary? What is it that I want to do? And so by starting to bake a pause like that into these tiny little moments where we're making choices, we start to see that what is like a habitual pattern doesn't have to necessarily be so.
That's an important example. And Johann, I'm curious, since we're talking money tales, which we really are encouraging folks to have money conversations, what are some of the tools you all help your clients with having productive and comfortable money conversations?
So much of authentic conversations comes down to honesty. There's so many reasons that we don't say what we want to say. Maybe we want to keep social harmony. Maybe we don't want to offend somebody. Maybe we're just afraid. Rejection is like the pain part of the brain. It was interesting, we were really focused on how do we help individuals take small actions and gain awareness over time. And one of the things that's come up is that actually what a lot of people want is actually things that they can do with their partner. And so we're actually about to launch a new product in that because we all come from these different pathways to where we are now. And they're so different and so varied. And it could be cultural values, it could be life experience values, and it could be that we were aligned on some things and we're really different in other things and what we like. Some people really like to show that they have wealth. Other people like to be really understated. And these can lead to massive tensions in our relationships. So that's something that we're starting to explore now. But I think the ability to listen is where it all starts in any conversation. Because if you can't really take in what the other person is saying, then there's sort of no exchange. It's usually like fixed talking points or fixed positions or wanting to advocate somebody to the position you're already in.
Right.
It seems hard. It can be
It's
very,
so
very
hard.
hard. It is a
Yeah.
learned practice.
It is.
Practice. I think that's the key word. You don't need everything to be perfect all the time. And create some grace for people to say something that they don't express quite right. That psychological safety can really be the foundation. But I would say it starts with listening and being open. Because if you're not open, then it's not a conversation. It's more like you're trying to convince somebody or you're trying to air some grievances.
That's right. I bet that's another great time for folks to pause, right? If you're in conversation and you realize that you're more focused on what you're going to say next as opposed to what the other person is telling you, that's a good indication that you need to take a deep breath and open up those ears a little more. It's hard to do. And I just want to add to what you were saying, because I had a conversation with a friend recently who had a money conversation with her daughter that went a little sideways, and she was asking me for my advice. Basically, I said, well, hey, can you go back and revisit the conversation with your daughter and just say, I'm sorry, I don't think that went the way that I wanted it to go? And she said, of course I can. And so I think there's just a reminder there too. Conversations around money with your partners, with family members, with friends, employers, whoever it's with, they're not usually one and done situations. They do require this practice, and it's okay to go back and revisit old ground if you realize you didn't really accomplish what you were hoping to in the conversation.
I would add to that this dynamic too of there isn't one right way to be in relationship with money. It's more a matter of what's your right way to be in right relationship in a way that can be like healthy for you. And that being ultimately the purpose. And that requires a level of like non-judgmentalism. I look at the way my parents are with me and my choices, and they're like, it's taken them a while, but it's also like, okay, we wouldn't do it that way, but also you're happy and that matters. And so there is something about being able to do that for people that in a couple, it's sometimes it can be a little different because you are making sure choices that have to do with both of you. But being able to see that there's a reason why you're saying and feeling the things that you do, and that can be like its own coherent logic that I can respect, even if we have to find a way to compromise. And that can do a lot for the ability to listen and to be able to like problem solve together too.
Something that Uma's saying really makes me think about one of the things that we've learned from each other in our marriage. I grew up in a family where people are pretty blunt with each other. And I maybe underappreciated social harmony in those contexts. I felt like not saying something is like not being authentic. Whereas in other cultural contexts, keeping the harmony of the group is a really high on the list of things to maintain. And sometimes that harmony of the group is more important than whatever individual opinion someone might have. There's a balance in a dance of like cultural literacy. Also, especially for couples that are interculturally married like that.
Good points. And I'm so glad you guys are doing the work that you're doing and sharing your thoughts with us today. Tell us, Uma and Johann, what are your next money conversations going to be and who will they be with?
One is we're running a startup together. So those conversations are like, do we raise money? Do we put money in? How much? What are the milestones? And we're also living our lives. So that adds complication of like, so that's definitely one. Just really calibrating, understanding when do we want to take risks? What are we really comfortable with? Because I may be comfortable with one thing on a given day, and Uma may be feeling a very different way. So we've got to navigate that. And I think another big one is that, I have a mom who's moving in with us, who has some memory decline, is still happy and healthy, but, isn't able to work anymore. And so we're taking that in. And, Uma's attitude is like the most loving, generous person, which is which is her superpower and why I'm so grateful to be with her. But also I want to make sure that I'm honoring, that changes for her as well. And even though that's her default, I don't want it to get it to a point where that creates frustration or resentment, but that's not her nature. But I think it's just being proactive in conversations about that, how we're using our time, because to us, wealth is time, resources, and attention. And so we're spreading our wealth into new things. And, life is dictating that, but it's important that we stay in sync and create balance even in the transition or the change.
What an important conversation and conversations to be having. And thanks for sharing so much with us. I think we could go on for hours about your book, and congratulations again, Wealth and Why We Seek It. Before we let you go, where's the best place for our listeners to find you?
If you want to find out more about both the book and the company, go to TruWorthShift.com. We're both on LinkedIn as individuals, but also you can find TruWorth on LinkedIn and Instagram. You can follow Johann. It's at Johann Bieberlin, and then your TruWorth. So that's where we're also sharing some of the insights and snippets of books and articles and kind of ways to stay engaged.
Thanks for doing the work you're doing. It's really important, and we can't wait to follow and stay in touch. Thanks for joining us on Money Tales.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
We're just off with Uma and Johann, and what a wonderful conversation. It's fun to have two guests on at one time. That was neat, and Uma's stories in particular really got me thinking about my relationship with money, being a second-generation American, and my strong upbringing around save, which is great. But then there's, what was it, Johann's word? There's a shadow side that maybe it isn't always, you have to just make sure it's working for you.
That's right. There's a benefit and a detriment to everything. And I love their idea of taking the pause and
taking the pause,
investigating what's working for you and what's not
in
the moment to help you be more aligned with what's most important to you in that money conversation and where you want to take it. I also want to highlight the power of Money Tales, Cami, because hearing other people's money stories week to week, including Johann and Uma's, just gets me thinking about my own money story. It's hard not to have that relationship of like, oh yeah, just like you were saying, the connecting points between you and Uma and your family's histories. And just so much comes up for us when we're talking about money. We learn so much.
Sandy, so true. About life,
about each other, about how we work within life, about how money conversations with your partner or spouse aren't always meant to be easy because you're two different people.
That's right. And the importance of listening is so hard sometimes.
It's so hard. We all have so much to say. But I truly believe listening is one of the biggest gifts that we can give other people. Just the opportunity to make them feel seen and heard is so huge. And I always think about the times in my life where I want that for myself and I don't always get it.
And how it makes you feel.
Yes, it's just powerful. So to be able to do that for someone else is amazing. And I just have so much gratitude for Uma and Johann to be our guests today, to share about their stories, about the really cool work that they're doing. And I hope that this conversation inspired our listeners to go out and have your next money conversation and come on the show. Tell us about it.
Great idea, Sandy. Give us a ring.
Yeah.
Or
Reach
send
out
us
to
an
us on
email.
LinkedIn. And definitely, if you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend. See you next time on Money Tales.
Thanks for listening to the Money Tales podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with someone you think would benefit from listening. And leave us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. Your ratings and reviews help more people find our podcast. If you're inspired to gain clarity and peace of mind about financial matters, don't hesitate to reach out to our team at Aspiriant. Go to aspiriant.com/start a dialogue. Or you can email Sandy and me at podcasts@aspiriant.com. See you next time.